How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here. One of my favorite series I do on this channel, 10 games on 10 consoles. Gives me a chance to give a shout out to some of these great games. They don't necessarily have to be the rarest, most expensive games. And sometimes they're not even necessarily hidden gems. They're just great games that you can play. However you need to play them. You're bound to find something you love, maybe a game you forgot about, maybe even a game that you yourself skipped over back in the day. Mania for the Game Boy Classic. Now, Mania, if you're not familiar, well, it starts off with a little storyline to tell you what's going on. The dude steals the moles, the dad comes home, and now you gotta get your wife and kids back. Well, this game's like an action puzzle game. You have your mole, that's you, and you have two different areas. You have the above ground and you have the underground. So you can to get to where you need to go, you can go underground and dig through and then pop back up and to move on through these stages. You will find enemies, but you'll also find items and things that you can use to get past the enemies to get on to the next stages. Each room that you go into, and a lot of these stages just kind of plays like the single stage room to get from point A to point B. So every stage is like, just a bunch of these little mini puzzles that you have to get through. I just think it's wonderful. This game even has bosses and stuff later on. Mania, I can't recommend it enough. I've been doing this series for a while now. I haven't talked about any Wii games yet. Let's talk about Blox from Electronic Arts. Now, in our days, when the Wii came out, which was only like, 2005, 2006. Now, before we had Angry Birds, we had Blox. I'm just showing you the trailer here. The idea behind this is using your Wii remote, you can kind of pull out these pieces as needed, a little bit like a Jenga. And you can also throw these balls that will make the crystals disappear or, blow up or shatter. You can throw your ball at the bombs as well to make them blow up and make things fall down and shatter and, lots of explosions and things like that. It was a great use of the Wii Remote, super fun, super innovative. Again, this is before we had VR, before we had Angry Birds. You look at the box art and you're just like, it's kind of a kid's game, but man, when you start playing it, it is so fun. A lot of fun to be had with this game, especially the fact that you can build your own levels and, you just want to see stuff blow up. Can't go wrong there. Blox, definitely recommended on the Nintendo Wii. Taking you back to the Super Nintendo, we have Cubert 3. Let's talk about it. Now, Cubert was one of my personal favorite arcade games growing up. I played it a lot, mostly on the Atari 2600. And Cubert 2, I'm guessing they're calling Cubert Cubes as Cubert 2, I'd be okay with that. So Cubert 3, more the same, but going back to Cubert, where you just have to jump on each platform to change the color. That's how you get past these stages. And the very first stage should look very familiar to you. But then different stages, can play around with the playing field. So it's not just the same stage over and over and over again with different criteria. A lot of the same, familiar enemies as well with Coily the snake, the guys that kind of come in sideways. That's always annoying. It's a fun, chill game. I mean, it can get pretty stressful because sometimes you feel like you just get trapped and you're trying to jump up and you don't know which way the ball's going to go, so you just take a gamble at it and stuff. Huge fan of Cubert 3. If you liked Cubert, you're going to love Cubert 3. For the Nintendo GameCube, I will never stop talking about Ribbit King. My introduction to Ribbit King came when I was working on the radio. I used to be the afternoon DJ at Z103, Idaho's #1 hit music channel in Idaho Falls, Idaho. I was there for 5 years. And during that time, they kind of gave me carte blanche to just say, hey, if you want to give away some prizes on the air, we don't mind if you call around or do some cold calls or reach out to companies asking for stuff to give away on the air. So of course, me being the gamer I am, I reached out to all the video game companies saying, hey, I have an afternoon radio show in this town. If you want me to give away stuff and help you, talk about it on the air and all that, I'm happy to do it. And Bandai, of all companies, were very gracious to give me prizes to give away on the air, like video games and stuff. One time, Bandai gave me a stack of Ribbit King demos to give away. And I hadn't heard of Ribbit King at the time, so I popped in the demo and I was blown away. I fell in love with it immediately to the point where I literally just, ran to Game Crazy and grabbed a copy of Ribbit King and never looked back. I'm so happy. That's the turn of events that led me to discovering Ribbit King. As you can tell from the footage, yes, it's basically golf, but it's you versus someone else. You have to, thwack the mallet. You can, arc it or turn it. You can get points along the way too. So less about going straight to the goal, which helps, but you also want to find a way to get some extra points along the way too to really rack up your score. And that way, that's how you win. Especially the later levels in this game is by doing these bonuses and things to get yourself to the end of the game here. Man, what a fun game. Wardner, you might know it as Pyros. It came out as Pyros in the arcade, something like that for the Famicom disk system of all things too. I didn't know about that until later in life. But when we had Pyros in my arcade. I think I saw Pyros. I think it was at the Tiger Mart. On the corner of 24th and Nob Hill in my town of Yakima. It may have been at the arcade at Valley Mall at the time. Either way, I really like this game. And when I saw Wardner on the Genesis when it first came out, I was like, oh, that looks a lot like Pyros. And looking at it, I was like, no, wait a minute. This is Pyros. It can't fool me. So never mind. Wardner on the Genesis, we can just call it that anyway. Fun game, frustrating, just by nature of how you jump and how your weapon just kind of like falls. You throw fireballs, but they kind of arc and then fall down to the ground instead of just going straight across the screen like most other arcade games at the time, where it's like you shoot all the way across the screen. This one has a little bit of an arc to it. You're just like, oh, well. But I still have a lot of fun with this game. Again, pretty frustrating because of the jumping and all that. But I certainly do love me some Wardner. Happy to recommend it. PlayStation 2, we can talk about Maximo, Ghosts and Glory. Now, when this game kind of came out, in the magazines and all that, they were basically saying it was the PlayStation 2 updated version of Ghosts and Goblins. And I do love me some Ghosts and Goblins. And you hear a little bit of that with the music in the background. But, I mean, the more I played this game, the more I'm like, well, it's less like, I mean, it's more like inspired by Ghosts and Goblins, but it's still kind of in the Ghosts and Goblins universe, if that makes sense. Because it's not very Ghosts and Goblins-like, outside of the fact that it is very Ghosts and Goblins-like. I know that makes zero sense, but it makes all the sense to me. Like, when I think of Ghosts and Goblins, I think of this great action platformer, 2D. You pick up the different weapons, you can pick up, the different suits of armor and all that. And this is a little like that, but as a 3D platformer. And so many games at the time, especially for the PlayStation 2, were these kind of action 3D platformers. So there's like, hey, well, if we're going to make a 3D platformer, let's just make one, but let's make it be Ghosts and Goblins. Let's do that. And I was like, all right, let's do that. And I'm glad they did. There's a couple of them on here. This is the first one. The second one's great too, though. But the second one might be a recommendation in another video. You never know. Keeping the theme with the kind of medieval and the swords and all that, Wizards and Warriors for the NES. This game, in my opinion, is kind of one of the super common games when it comes to the Nintendo library. There are the hidden gems, there are the rare games that are hard to find and all that, and then there are these super commons, the ones that you can find for $5, the ones that everybody had in their collection. If you didn't, you knew a friend who did. The ones that you borrowed from someone, the ones that you just pick up because like, oh sure, why not? And that's a game for the time. It was, everywhere. So yeah, may as well grab it. It looks pretty cool. The box art looked great. The back of the box looked great. Perfect. But I'm recommending it now because, again, there are so many gamers today who are maybe getting into the NES library that either, just kind of disregarded it or maybe they haven't even heard of this one, or maybe they haven't played this one. Because yeah, it was super common to us growing up. But, to them, it's like, well, people are growing up now with the entire NES library. They can just pick and choose whatever they want to play right off the get-go. And while most go for like a Castlevania or a Contra, then maybe they skip over this one. Now, this is a game you can beat the first time you play it. Unlimited continues, and you continue right where you left off. Now, with the bosses, the bosses are going to be back to full health, so if you keep dying at a boss, you have to get to a point where you can beat the boss in one life. Yeah, I'm sure you can figure it out. But fun to explore. You have to get all the gems to move on to the next stage. You have to get enough gems so the guy moves out of the way and says, okay, yeah, you can pass. You kind of have to bribe the gatesman, basically, with all the gems you find. You can do that by picking up the different colored keys. The different colored keys will open up those doors, will open up those treasure chests. Potions along the way will help you out. Items along the way that you find in these treasure chests will help you out. Like ones to make you fall slower, ones to make you, instead of just swinging your sword. The swinging the sword button doesn't do a whole lot in this game, but you can use it to, kind of throw an axe that will kind of turn around and come back. Things like that. Love this game. Boy, never thought I'd see an M&M's game on one of these videos. This is for the Game Boy Advance. M&M's Break 'em is the name of this game. And I was curious about it because I was hoping it was going to be more of like a Breakout style, like an Arkanoid style. And it turns out it's not, but still kind of fun to look at. With a game like this, there's these kind of third-party NES games. There's one called Dudes with Attitudes. There's a Trolls one as well, both basically the same game. And it's like that. Now, your M&M is that color, and only that color can shatter that block. But there are these little inkwells or whatever that will change your color. So you can use those to change the color of your M&M to shatter those other blocks. And you have to watch out for the obstacles. You have to keep going back. You're just going to keep bouncing back and forth. That's all you're going to do. You're just going to bounce back and forth. Something slightly addicting about this game, though. Something about this game that's like, I'll just keep playing this for a while. I don't know, I just thought it was worth checking out. Can't believe I've gone this far in this video series and not talked about Mischief Makers yet for the Nintendo 64. It was one of the first 64 games I picked up that was like, ooh, a 2D game on a 64? Because at the time, the 64 was like, oh, it's 3D graphics, you can do this and that, and you got games like Mario 64, you got games like, F-Zero or Cruis'n USA, whatever they had at the time. And then it's like, wait a minute, the 2D games are still worth it. 2D games are still good. And so here's Treasure coming out with Mischief Makers, which has more of a grapple mechanic than it does an attack graphic or mechanic. Like you're doing more grabbing things and shaking them. or items, or ways to get to higher ground and all that, than you are with attacking. And that's kind of the puzzle action game that you might get with a game from Treasure, with just, like bright, colorful graphics, fun gameplay, something unique. And people who love them some Mischief Makers will definitely let you know that they love them some Mischief Makers for the Nintendo 64. Would love to see this game come back. PlayStation 1, man, I played a lot of this game called PO'd, and wanted to showcase it here. Sharecase, actually, I don't know, I kind of like that word, sharecase. I'm going to sharecase this game called PO'd for the PlayStation 1. I'm sure it's on other platforms as well, but I played it on the PlayStation 1. It was another Doom clone, because now with the PlayStation and the 3D graphics, you can have games like Doom and things like that too. And this was one that was like, hey, you know what, let's make a Doom game, but give it a bunch of weird attitude stuff. So the aliens are weird, the weapons are weird. I mean, you start off with a frying pan, which I think is hilarious. But you get weapons later on, like a drill. You can get the hatchets and stuff that you can throw. There's like little laser guns and stuff like that too. And I don't know. I had a lot of fun with this game. I just had a lot of fun with this game it was called PO'd, which is also kind of hilarious too. But it was just another Doom-style game to play and have fun and explore. And I loved, because it was on the PlayStation, I was just like, oh, that's such a cool thing that you can do. Because again, for me, basically going from the Super Nintendo to the PlayStation 1, the fact that you could launch your rocket and then you become the perspective of the rocket, so you could go crash right into an enemy, or you could even sweep it around and find yourself standing there in this kind of 2D setting, in a way. How the graphics were set up, so it's like, it still looks the same no matter which angle you're at, but then the whole room is 3D. Yeah, you know how that is. PO'd for the PlayStation 1. It's fun to go back to and just look at, just to see where we came from. There's always more recommendations on the way. I thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. You're awesome. And check out my shop below as well. I always got the stuff I sell, like my custom air fresheners, my homebrew NES games, and a whole lot more. Helps support the channel. Thank you. That's all I got.